Hello, and welcome back to Donoram Monologue Podcast. I am your host, Beau Weber, and today we'll be talking about various topics. We'd like to take a moment to encourage those of you wanting to know about nursing as a lifestyle, profession, or the advanced educations of such to check out Ashley Luann K on YouTube. You can find her channel by searching Ashley Luann K on YouTube or by checking out her link on rallynetworks.net. We're back on camera. We're back on film. Our major shelter in place or shelter at home or hunker down or whatever order it was called ended at 11:59 on May 1st, and we're allowed to go back and out and about. I guess we weren't really not allowed to before, but I guess it was the responsible thing to do. But we're back, and you're gonna have to bear with me. It's kind of awkward to be back on camera, but I mentioned before, if you listen to the ones that weren't watchable, they were only listenable. That we have a lot of time. We had a lot of time on our hands, obviously, and one of the things I used my time with was to get back into an MMO, which I said I wasn't going to do at the beginning of this. I may have even said it here on the channel. But the MMO I chose to get back into was Final Fantasy XIV. Final Fantasy has obviously been on a lot of people's minds, with the 7 remake arguably being the biggest game to come out during this time period. So, of course, we all got our stimulus checks, unemployment coming in, and this economy is stimulated. We've been spending money like roughnecks on shore leave. I'm kidding. No, we've been very thrift with it. But I did buy a subscription to 14 again and start playing, and man, it's grown a lot. It has grown a lot, and I understand now why it's such a serious competitor for World of Warcraft, because it is. They poured their heart and soul into it. And the game's got kind of an interesting story. So I'm sure you've heard all this before, but people listen to podcasts to get told what they already know, so they can sit in the car and nod as they drive and go, yeah, I know that. So 14 came out in 2010, and this was a horrible year, really, to be releasing an MMO, because you were going up against Star Wars: The Old Republic, and you were going up against Cataclysm, the expansion to World of Warcraft. And I think 11 even had an expansion in 2010, but anyway, it came out and it bombed. It was terrible. It was an awful game. I don't know what it was about it, because I never played the original version, but it was just terrible, so much so that Square Enix actually issued a public apology for making it as poorly as they did. So fast forward 3 years from then, and Square Enix honestly did probably the wisest thing I think they could have done, and that is, instead of remaking the game, they made an incredibly large patch. And so people that had already had the game got this for free, and it was a whole new game, but it was just a huge patch. And what it was ARR, A Realm Reborn. And so they honored people that had stayed with them and had a subscription up to through this. You got legacy benefits for sticking through it. It wasn't like you had to start all over again, which was really cool. And the story continued on as well. It's actually a continuation of the story. So it's kind of an interesting story, because the day it came out, people were just super willing to give it a chance. More people gave it a chance than they did with the original one. And it is now a legit competitor to World of Warcraft. It is actually on its level. And one of the things that made me think about that today was, when I got back into it, I'm a sucker for collectibles. We talked about that. And I ordered these beautifully illustrated lore books. There's a... for those of you listening, I was paging the book, and it's a very new, stiff book, so it closed on itself. But for those of you watching... listening rather, because the ones watching can obviously just see it. It's the Encyclopedia Eorzea 1 and 2. They're lore books. They're encyclopedias of the fictional world of Hydaelyn, in which Final Fantasy XIV takes place. And they're just... I've never actually held the... Adam, have you ever actually touched the Azeroth books that Blizzard came out with? You read a digital print of one, but have you ever actually held the actual books? So I can't comment on those, but if these aren't equal, I imagine they'd have to be better. These are amazing. It feels like they're bound in something that feels like a dusty old tome you'd find in a library in Ishgard, and the pages are like this really thick cardstock. Like, they're not just like paper. It feels like a... oh, what's that? It feels like that paper they make that like craft shows make their flyers with. Like it's a very thick paper, but it feels amazing. And as you can see, it's beautifully illustrated. Or if you can't see, just take my word for it. It's beautifully illustrated, and the information with them in them is absolutely it's a treasure trove of information on the game's fictional world. And that's what made me realize that this is such a serious competitor to Warcraft, because Warcraft, of course, has this extensive lore, and that's what keeps a lot of its diehard fans there. But this does too, and that's incredible for a Final Fantasy game, because most Final Fantasy games have just enough lore to get you through the main scenario. Like, they make up a new world with each game, so obviously they're just going to give you as much as you need to get through that game. And I know my eyes are darting everywhere, guys. I'm getting used to being on camera again. It's been a month and a half, a little bit over, yeah. So I'll get used to it again. It'll be easier with Don sitting next to me. But so that's kind of what that's kind of what made me realize that in 14 the community in it is so vibrant and alive. And what's funny is people in the community of Final Fantasy 14 are doing things that people in the community of Warcraft were doing 15 years ago. It's still fresh in 14, and it's incredible that it's fresh in 14 because they're on their third expansion. They're in the Kata era. Kata is when every Warcraft player became jaded. Like, the beauty of Classic when it launched was we had about 3 months where people acted like it was a joy to play Warcraft again, and now they're just back to, they don't even talk to each other in dungeon runs. They're doing it as quick as possible. Like, it's just back to jaded war. But people in Final Fantasy 14 still want to play an MMO. All the quality of life things are there in 14. You have LFG, Raid Finder, Dungeon Finder. They're called Duty Finders in Final Fantasy 14 because, of course, it just has no one expects them to have a different name for these things, but they do. Like, instead of guild, you have free company. It'd be cool for you to call it a guild. You don't have to do that, but they do that just to make it even, because there's lore behind every single thing. Like, even your chat, like your chat, there's lore behind how that works, which I always thought that was really cool. But so it still feels like people are still making it fresh. People are still making it fun. It's just it's a joy to play Final Fantasy 14. And I'm not just saying that as a Final Fantasy stan. And another neat thing about it is you don't find too many people that are just super into Final Fantasy playing 14. There are people that are just super into MMOs, or some people that was their first MMO. The marketing for it was just brilliant. So I've just absolutely fallen in love all over again. Now, the question on everyone's mind, the way I've been talking, I'm sure, is it better than World of Warcraft? And I would say no. I don't think anything in our life will ever compare to World of Warcraft. At its peak, I think there was 15 million people subscribed to World of Warcraft. That's incredible. That's, that is New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago all combined playing at once. That's astronomical numbers. That's hard to even believe. But there's 14, I think, at its peak had like 11, and I don't think any other MMOs ever come that close to Warcraft's. No, EverQuest. I think EverQuest peak was like 500,000. Like, so that's what's incredible about Warcraft is. But Warcraft's marketing campaign was just outrageous. I mean, you had Ozzy Osbourne and Mr. T telling you to play Warcraft on commercials and stuff like that. I think that was during the Wrath era, because remember the Ozzy commercial, he was like facing off against Arthas, and he did the annoying like Sharon thing because it's kind of weird. Like, I wonder if like people that saw Ozzy in like the 80s look at him now and are just like, oh man, like what? He's kind of a living gag character now. He looks he's more like a side character on this. Ozzy, if you're listening, I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to tear you through the ground, but come on, man. And it's, but yeah, that's in 14 didn't have that. I don't think I've seen a single TV commercial for 14. So for it to have raised to this level, the way it has, especially after a failed launch, a legit failed launch where the president of your or whoever it was issued a public apology, and to come back like this, I think that's just incredible. I think that's one of the biggest feathers in Square Enix's cap. And there is, of course, she got through. Did you get through the maze? Stephanie's here doing the maze for Animal Crossing, and she just got through it. She cleared it. That's awesome. Let us know if you cleared the maze in Animal Crossing today, May 1st. So Where was I again? But where was I again? Oh, the subject for the whole thing. somewhere around there. It's like being in college and the professor going, "Where was I again?" And someone's like, "Physics." Was it physics, sir? So yeah, no, especially after the president issued a public apology, for them to have come back like that, I think is just incredible. And again, even if you're not, and I was telling Adam on the way back over here, a regular raid in 14 is like a mythic in WoW. Like, it is an incredibly challenging game, but it's challenging but not impossible to meet the challenge. It's not outside, and you feel accomplished for learning to do a job well in Final Fantasy 14, which I think is pretty cool because, I mean, after Kata, let's face it, the WoW classes are brain dead. Anyone can play anything. It's not that hard. I mean, on a mythic level, yeah, absolutely. There's still a lot of skill in that game, but I mean, there was that one guild that stopped operations after Cataclysm. Like, they were a super huge one of those. We have our own websites, and like our streams hit like millions of views every hour. They quit at Cat, so they quit before that kind of era of streaming. Like, I mean, 2010 is well before Twitch, or Twitch was super small at the time, if anything. Exactly, you couldn't you didn't sit. I was not watching Smash tournaments on my couch in 2010. I was watching them on YouTube after they happened. Still exciting, but it's like Evo has Evo nowadays has like a Super Bowl feel to it, because you can get on the couch and you can have friends over and you have chips, and that's where we are now with Twitch. So that's a whole other podcast though, is Twitch. But yeah, if Final Fantasy XIV is currently doing a free log-on phase, I think it's lasting until like May something. It's one of because Square Enix is absolutely pulling out all the stops of the stay-at-home campaign. They gave away one of their biggest games ever. I think Rise of the Tomb Raider, or the original Tomb Raider, the 2013 Tomb Raider. They just gave that game away for free during this time, and they've got awesome sales going on. They're very much encouraging people to stay home because we're not back to normal yet. I don't think we're. My wife was explaining some phases to me, and I was only half paying attention because I was playing Final Fantasy XIV. But because I'm not real interested in getting back out anyway, I've got video games to play. But during this time, I strongly suggest you take advantage of some of those deals that are going on. Steam sales have been ridiculous, I hear, for PC gamers. And I know that Xbox and PlayStation have had incredible sales every day. But Final Fantasy XIV, I guess my message in this whole thing, I guess I'll just put it in plain words. If you're a diehard World of Warcraft player, like if you've never played any other MMO, take some time during this free campaign and play about a week of Final Fantasy XIV, and let us know what you think. Or if you just think it's cool, like just keep playing it. Like I think it's well worth your time.